Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, we are talking about the best decks for the WCQ, World Championship Qualifiers. And we're going to go through the Duelist Cup style event and just kind of showcase what decks are going to be the best and going to help you the most to get to Stage 2 and to play in Stage 2 as effectively as you can. Now, I will say, first and foremost, that just like with every meta, the better players are going to win. So while these decks might be good, you do have to put in a lot of time and effort into learning pretty much every single one of these decks to be able to effectively compete. Cool. Let's start off here with Cool Tune. We're going to start with Cool Tune here. I think Cool Tune is a nice tier 1. I think it's really good. I think it has a nice, solid game plan going first. I think the biggest downside to it is the fact that it isn't a fantastic deck going second. You are kind of at the whim of your hand traps, which can be a bit frustrating, but in a more centralized metagame where you're not playing up against a whole array of different archetypes and different strategies, with the metagame more centralized around things like branded Draco Tail, and Cool Tune in particular, I think you have an easier time kind of preparing your hand traps and making sure that you're mitigating the losses that you are taking from just having a bad hand trap. And so I think that kind of bumps it up a little, but I also think it's just consistent. It's a nice consistent deck that's going to be able to fairly consistently get you those wins where you would need them. I don't think it's fantastic, but I think it is a nice solid option. Next up, we have branded Draco Tail, which I'm also going to put in tier 1. I think this is the best deck. Period. Hands down. No questions asked. The reason for it is kind of everything. Like, it has the ability to do a nice big combo with the branded stuff, allowing you a ton of points of interaction. It has the ability to play under hand traps, pretty much every single one of them that are of note. Things like Maxi, Valor, not Valor, Fualos, Droll, even Nibiru, it can play around very effectively. So pretty much any of the big hand traps that you would expect, it can play pretty easily around. The big downside is something like Impulse, for example, but even Impulse, it has the ability to effectively play around due to the branded cards and adding additional like must answer with Impulse spells that you activate, like Ketu or Branded Fusion or Rahu or something of that nature. So there's a lot of cards in that deck in particular that just kind of force plays, and I think it plays really well just in the current metagame and against a lot of those top traps. Speaking of which, Branded I think is also another tier 1 top tier archetype. We might change some of the archetypes around, but for the most part, I think that this one is also another nice top tier deck, just because it has the ability to play in pretty much every single one of its games. You're not just going to randomly lose to something, right? Maybe you'll lose to like a Floodgate here or there, but there's not a lot of those running around. There's not a lot of those decks running around right now, and I don't think there's a lot of good decks that can make use of any of these Floodgates. For the most part, maybe there will be a few, but again, I think that Branded just having the ability to play so consistently, even against something like Cool Tune with the like hand knowledge and like crafting the top of your deck, it could just not matter against Branded. So it's a bunch of stuff of that nature that I think makes Branded very strong. Next up, we have Sky Striker, which I'm going to put into... The thing is, I'm going to put it in tier 2, but I'm hesitant to do so because its only real good matchup is specifically Cool Tune. Other than that, it doesn't really have that great of a matchup against the rest of the metagame. It's okay into Branded because Branded just has some insane power spells, and being able to interact with power spells is not necessarily what this deck, Sky Striker, is known for. But on top of that, it's like a lot of their stuff is individual removal spells, where Branded can just put out so many bodies so effectively that it doesn't do a whole lot to consistently remove like a piece here or a piece there. Brandon's just going to be able to play the game pretty much regardless. Same thing with Draco Tail, right? That's another like bad matchup. So I'm hesitant to put it in tier 2. I might move a whole bunch of things down as we go along. Next up, we have Radiant Typhoon, which I think is a fairly solid tier 2. I think it's good. I think it's solid, but it is kind of just a matter of, do you see the right quick plays? Similar to that of Cool Tune, but with quick plays and less of a automatic win going first. And I think that's kind of its downside. Anea Craft is maybe Rogue, It's kind of the anti-meta deck of the current metagame, but I'm also going to put Odeon right there next to it. They're kind of the control strategies, right? They have the ability to slow down the pace of the game, and they don't activate nearly as many cards. Well, I guess NACraft does. NACraft is basically a combo deck, let's be honest. But with that being said, both of these are reliant on kind of like stunning the opponent or like stopping their plays, right? That control strategy, controlling what the opponent is getting to activate. And both of them kind of function in a similar manner. They're not too different from one another. And yeah, NACraft also could be hit pretty hard by whatever ends up being meta, right? If Droll ends up being really relevant in this metagame, then it's like, yeah, NACraft's going to fall off pretty hard. But if it's not, then NACraft can be a little bit better. And it does have the ability to play specifically Di-Fi, Dimensional Fissure, which allows you to kind of cut off all of the top 3 decks, which is pretty nice. Next up, we have Wing Control K9, which I think is fantastic. I'm going to put it above Branded. Yeah, it's just fantastic. Being able to do all of the K9 line is really, really strong. It won the last Duelist Cup, and the only thing that really got better is Branded and Draco Tail. Everything else was worse. So I think for the most part, it's really, really well positioned for this metagame because both Draco Tail and Branded kind of get destroyed. Destroyed's not the right term. They're noticeably weaker against K9 than they would be against like Cool Tune. So that is another advantage that Vanquish K9 has. I still don't think it's enough to like put them above some of the other decks, but the K9 cards are so incredibly powerful that being able to actually utilize them so effectively and still have the ability to, again, play under a lot of these hand traps that are so game determinative, besides Droll, and even then you can kind of still make it, I don't know, you can kind of play around Droll with some of the hands. It's not great, but like you can, right? So there are weaknesses to the deck, right? But I don't think it's bad. Obviously, right? I think it's really, really strong. I just think it is not quite as strong for the current game as something like Branded Draco Tail. Next up, we have Lunalight. Lunalight, I think, is another solid option. I don't think it's fantastic, but it does have the ability to just kind of like have the auto-win button. You know, do you have the out? Not a lot of decks do. Not a lot of decks are going to be playing the out, but like some decks will, right? Some decks will be able to just out the guy, but also you will likely have the ability to just ignore the Lunalight player by going first, right? Or by hand trapping them to death with something like Cool Tune. So there's that. I don't see a ton of decks being able to effectively deal with Liger Dancer, but it's more so, can Liger Dancer hit the field? And I don't know if that's going to be something that is consistently accessible for Lunalight. Next up, we have Mitsu. Mitsu has a few different variants. Obviously, the most important one would be the Ryziel variant, but even then, I still don't think Mitsu is going to do insanely well this tournament, mostly just due to the fact that the other decks just got way more powerful, and they don't really have the best of matchups against like Draco Tail and Branded and Vanquish and Cool Tune. So I'm gonna put him in tier 2 for now. Again, we might shift things around at the end, but for the most part, I think like a pure variant of Mitsu isn't great. If you were to play like a 60 card variant, that's also not going to be great. But then the Mitsu Ryziel stuff is still fairly good. Ryziel's still really strong. Speaking of which, Onomat still also exists with the Ryziel stuff. I'm going to put in Rogue for now. I just haven't seen it a whole bunch, but I don't think it's bad. I think the main downside is the fact that it's just more susceptible to a lot of these more powerful hand traps, and with decks like Cool Tune existing and being as popular as they are, you're going to get hit by a lot more hand traps, and being able to play through those hand traps does matter. And I think there's just a better rank 4 strategy, which we will talk about now, which is Zodiac. Zodiac, I think, is actually really well positioned now. More specifically because you can play it in a bunch of different archetypes. So I'm mostly just talking about the engine itself, but I do think probably Zodiac with the Radiant Typhoon stuff is likely to perform the best. But I think you also have the ability to play like Zodiac as a way to do like the Snake Eye stuff that you did previously, except instead of playing Snake Eye, you play like Zodiac and Millennium and Fiendsmith or something of that nature. I haven't cooked too much with Zodiac, but seeing what Rapier itself gets, being able to play up to 9 copies of Rapier as a way to just immediately summon out Utopic play through hand traps, and then also potentially grab a starter with that of Broad Bull, being able to search out something like a Radiant Typhoon starter, a Tri-Brigade starter, or even the Millennium card, gets you a lot of mileage. There's a ton that you can do off of that. And I think for that reason, I'm really highly prioritizing the Zodiac engine more so than anything. I don't think a pure Zodiac deck is going to do all that well, but I do think Zodiac as an engine is definitely something to look out for, similar to that of like how Millennium kind of popped off in the Snake Eye WCQ or Duelist Cup. I feel like this is going to be very similar. Next up we have Cool Tune, or this isn't Cool Tune. This is Elf Note. Elf Note I think is pretty solid. It's the like big wombo combo deck. You can play with Fiendsmith stuff. It does have Baron and makes a whole bunch of negates and interactions. Like they make DD High Wave King under Baron. They have the Trap to negate. They can make a whole bunch of other guys as well. And then not to mention all of the actual Elf Note shenanigans. So yeah, White Forest I think is just not good. I just don't think there's a real reason to play it. Same thing with DDD. These are just worse combo decks than Elf Note. That's it. Moving on, Exosister. Exosister could potentially do things. It's similar to like Odeon and Aneacraft in the sense that it is an anti-meta deck, while also being able to cut off the grave in that sense. So that could be useful, right? Playing like Shifter and Macro or Di-Fi or something else of that nature to kind of cut off a lot of those options, right? Even being able to cut off like Droll. That could be important. But even with that, I still don't think that it's that good of a deck right now. I think it's particularly well positioned now, but it is very susceptible to pretty much everything and anything, right? It loses to Droll, it loses to Ash sometimes, it loses to Imperm, it's not good into like established boards, like it's really bad going second. So I'm going to put it in Rogue just because it does have a good matchup against a lot of those top decks, but I don't think it's fantastic. Next up, we have Mermail. Mermail's just not great right now. Sure, you could potentially, like, stun your opponent with a barrier statue, but other than that, there's not a whole lot that Mermail does particularly well. Yeah, that's kind of it. Memento, I feel like, is kind of similar, except I think it's slightly better than Mermail in that sense, where it does actually have the ability to kind of make a pretty strong turn one board. It does have the ability to, crack established boards, especially with more of a reliance on engine as opposed to non-engine for a lot of the top decks, right? Like all of these top decks are basically just engine as opposed to powerful non-engine, and I think that kind of helps the Memento stuff. It's still susceptible to K9 and other such decks, but I think it's a pretty solid option. Doom's Ed does not have like nearly half of its cards. As you can see, we have a whole bunch of cards here that we just don't have in the game yet. And yeah, Doomsy really needs the new Power Patrons for it to really function. Predaplant's on here. We have Malice. Malice I think is really strong. I might put it in tier 1. I'm gonna put it in tier 1. Yeah, Malice is just very strong. Like, it's a really, really solid deck. Its biggest downside is consistency. However, it's Cybers, which means you can oftentimes even normal summon a hand trap and get your entire play started. And with the reliance on a lot of engine, it means there's less non-engine. Besides specifically Cool Tune, that's playing a ton of hand traps. A lot of decks are just going to let the Malice player play, which is just a death sentence. There's not a lot that you can do about that. If Malice plays the game and gets to do their whole line, they win. That's it. And the thing is, they also have the ability to play a lot of very powerful non-engine. Things like Impulse is insanely good, just in general, right? While it's not the greatest of matchups against, like, Cool Tune, other than that, it's really well positioned, and it is just an incredibly strong deck, allowing you the ability to just kind of auto-win going first. I might be over-prioritizing it, but I just think that it's so incredibly powerful going first, and it's not bad going second, that it's in a really good position. Next up, we have Gem-Knights. Gem-Knights, I think, are fine. They're okay. I don't think they're going to have, like, a standout performance, or that they're going to be insanely good. It's kind of another one of those, like, anti-meta calls, where it's a lot of, like, I'm going to Floodgate you, or I'm going to use the Heralds, but, like, Heralds... specifically Herald of Orange Light, is now at 1, which means that your biggest advantage has now kind of dissipated. You don't really have the ability to do that anymore. So, I don't know. I might even be rating it too high over the Mitsu stuff, but we'll put it at the top of Rogue. Magnets, I think, are pretty solid. Kind of another Floodgate combo deck. I don't think they're as good as the Elf Note stuff. I think the Elf Note stuff, being able to make Baron so efficiently and so quickly, I think is very important. The biggest upside that the Magnets have is that they actually have game going second. They can actually play into established boards. However, with the power level of a lot of boards, I'm less concerned about that, right? We've seen it pop off specifically in a lot of the 3v3 shared card tournaments where it's done fairly well, but outside of that, it hasn't really done a whole lot, right? I don't know, it's good. It's very good, but it's another one of those combo decks that just kind of auto wins going first and has a harder time going second. I think it's just worse Malice. That's pretty much what it is, right? It's like, oh, if you do the combo, you win the game, but your combo's more susceptible to a bunch of different things. Like, it's susceptible to Droll, it's susceptible to Ashe, sometimes, well, I guess not really Ashe, but it's susceptible to Fua, it's susceptible to Maxi, it's susceptible to Shifter, it's susceptible to like Di-Fi and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like a weaker version of Malice. So there's not really a reason to just play the Magnets as opposed to just playing Malice. Fire King is pretty cool, but I don't think it's great. I'm gonna put it in Rogue because I don't think there's a metagame where I wouldn't put this in Rogue, just because it works so well at doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which does really well into pretty much anything, right? Like, just regardless of what meta it is, what deck it is, it just always has the ability to have game, right? Being able to destroy cards, always going to be useful. Like, punishing destruction effects, always going to be useful, right? Like, there's always some sort of game there. I don't think it's great, but Fire King always has something there. Next up we have Yummy, and I have two Yummies on here, and the reason for that is because Yummy with other decks is obviously significantly better, but I do just want to talk about Yummy in general. Obviously, we have the Fiendsmith on here. I think Yummy Fiendsmith is fine. It's not exceptional. It's just kind of like worse Malice. But I do think that Yummy with a like Radiant Typhoon engine, or Yummy with the Mitsurugi stuff, or Yummy with almost anything has a lot of oomph. I'm gonna put it at like the top of tier 2 here, just in general, right? I guess we'll do something like that, right? Yummy, the biggest advantage that Yummy has is the fact that it kind of punishes interaction, right? Like, if you try and interact with it, it can kind of punish you. But also, it's so easy to get into the Yummy cards off of pretty much anything. And with the new Tri-Brigade cards, which I forgot to put Tri-Brigade on here, with the new Tri-Brigade cards, you actually do have an easier time getting both to Yummy and making use of the Radiant Typhoon cards, which makes it even more easy to access really powerful staples, like, for example, Herald of Arclight, which is a staple card that we still have access to that kind of floodgates a lot of the top decks, while also being an incredibly useful piece of your end board against pretty much anything. So I think it's really well positioned to just make Herald of Arclight over and over and over again. That's kind of the big thing. Okay, I just added the Tri-Brigade deck on here, and we're going to talk about it because I think Tri-Brigade is actually pretty solid now. Probably like around there. Tri-Brigade actually does have game now. The new Spriggan kit adds a ton to the actual ability to play the game with Tri-Brigade, which I think is a lot. Mauser also gives you the ability to utilize the Radiant Typhoon Speedroid cards. I forget what they're called. The Terror Top-esque guys, Swen and Eldam, I believe, are the cards. Being able to utilize those alongside the actual Radiant Typhoon cards to go into things like Yummy, to go into the actual Tri-Brigade combo, to do a whole bunch of things off of those individual guys, makes Tri-Brigade, I think, fairly decently positioned, more so as an engine than an actual pure deck. But I still think that Tri-Brigade in general is something to look out for. We already talked about Elf Note. You're not really going to play it unless you're playing the Fiendsmith variant, or you're dumb. Those are your two options. I guess you could play it with Cool Tune. I've seen that, but I don't see a reason to do that. It's just worse Cool Tune. And you could also play it with Synchron, but we'll get to Synchron. Archmage could work, theoretically. I don't think it's too well positioned, but now you still have the ability to kind of do things with the Archmage stuff. I don't know. It's fine. Like, it works. That's it. Next up, we have Synchron. So, oh, there it is. Okay, it decided to play the game now. Yeah, Synchron, I think, is still really... I don't know. It's okay. You can play it with the Elf Note stuff as well. It's a big combo deck that dies, again, to kind of everything, but I don't think it's as strong as something like Magnet, because it really is susceptible going second. And while, sure, you can kind of auto-win going first, it's not as powerful because you have to play so much engine requirements in order to actually do things, right? Just due to the nature of Junk Synchron, not that one, Junk Speeder. In order to summon out a whole bunch of guys and get the maximum value, you just have to play a whole bunch of dead cards in your deck, which is not great. Like, that's not a good thing to have, right? Where you're just like, oh, here's a whole bunch of dead cards that don't do anything and are only used to be summoned off of this one guy so that I have the necessary requirements for this, right? And so, because of that, you're very susceptible to, both in deck building and outside of deck building, to just everything under the sun. It's really frustrating. Not a whole lot of real action that you can get there. That being said, if you want to play the bricks, you can play it with like Elf Note as well, and it might bump it up to like Rogue, but I still don't think it's great. Next up, we have Crystron K9. I think the K9 cards are just really, really strong right now, and in general, holistically. So I'm gonna bump it up there, not because of the Crystron cards. In fact, the Crystron cards I think are just really bad. As much as we love Blue Eyes, it's not very good. It's really bad right now. That's it. I don't really have anything to say. There's nothing really advantageous about playing Blue Eyes. It's kind of a go first win style deck, like the myriad of other decks that currently exist within Yu-Gi-Oh! But there's also nothing that you're gaining by playing it. And again, it's very similar to the Synchron problem, where you're playing a whole bunch of dead cards that don't really do anything unless you summon them out off of the admittedly more options, right? But, having a whole bunch of normal monsters that don't do anything isn't exactly good, right? But you do get access to the Primate cards, which is nice. I have Crystron on here as well, which is a deck. Certainly exists. Let's talk about K9. K9, I think, is really strong right now. Just pure K9. And the reason for this, twofold. One, K9 Pure has the ability to play all of the actual really powerful K9 spells and traps, which is really nice. It gives you a lot of game on both players' turns in a lot of different ways, which is really powerful. And two, the actual K9 cards themselves are really well positioned through things like Ripper and Werewolf to actually punish any real form of interaction, both on your turn and on the opponent's, right? Being able to negate a hand effect is really solid against something like, I don't know, a Cool Tune, being able to negate like a Rotary, getting that extra normal summon. Or, more specifically, being able to negate the grave effects of a lot of cards. Sure, they can chain block a lot of those interactions, but, during the end phase, the branded cards can be punished by Ripper. Being able to negate pretty much any and everything from Draco Tail or branded or Cool Tune in some capacity gives a lot of game, meaning that the opponent has to play around that in some capacity. Then on top of that, you also have the ability to effectively go second with just engine, because your engine is so powerful. At going second, right, Izuna being able to go for the Lupus and all of that jazz, it's a nice solid addition to the archetype, meaning that you actually have the ability to go second. Also, you get to play a whole bunch of non-engine, which is something that not a ton of decks are capable of doing right now, right? Like, I guess Yummy, Malice, Cool Tune, those are like the big ones where it's like, oh, you get to play a whole bunch of I guess Sky Striker technically too, right? But more specifically, hand traps, right? That's a lot of it. I have had a ton of success personally with this deck, so I might be overrating this. However, I have seen that it works really well. I don't know if there's a reason necessarily to play pure K9 over just playing Vigorous Soul K9, and I think that's the only reason you probably won't see it at all. But I do think that it's fun. And I still think that it overall is really well positioned just because of how powerful the K9 cards are. So there's that. Next up we have Lab, which is just not good. I hate to say it, it's not a good deck anymore. Konami really hates trap cards, and they've made it abundantly clear that trap cards are just not allowed to exist because they have made almost every deck since, like, I don't know, since Lab, either Wombo combo or terrible. So there's that. Cool. Even Aneacraft does like combo stuff. Like it just searches out a whole bunch of things. So yeah. Anyway, we have Hecka Hands on here as well. Hecka Hands is funny. I like Hecka Hands. I'm not talking about Chimera. No one likes Chimera. Hecka Hands is cool. Kashtira, I think, is still decent. Maybe I'll put it in Rogue. I don't know. It's decent. This is another deck that has issue with just a bunch of random things, right? It's okay at being able to play into established boards, but it's not fantastic. It's okay at being able to set up its turn 1 boards, but it's not fantastic, right? It is susceptible to commonplace hand traps like Veilers and Imperms and Ash Blossoms and stuff of that nature. So it's still susceptible in the same way that it was previously of like, oh, sometimes you just draw the out and they die, right? Sometimes you get triple tacked, sometimes you get Book of Moon, sometimes you get Nibiru'd and you just die, right? Like it was previously. I don't think this deck is all that well positioned either. Yes, Macrocosmos on the big Arise Heart is very nice. Being able to play Di-Fi is also very nice. However, that requires you to go first in order to really make use of that, and going second, again, into those established boards might work, but it also might not do anything. And so I could see it do better, but I don't think it's that well positioned. We might see Fenris in maybe some of these other archetypes and other strategies, or just like a smaller Kashtira package in general with like Fenris and Unicorn and maybe a Birth there, but that's pretty much it. And then we have RB, which I just don't think is all that great right now. I know it kind of looks like I ordered these. These aren't ordered. I don't know. They exist. RB, it's fine, right? But there's not... It's kind of a combo deck that wants to go first, but its go first end board is very susceptible to a bunch of things. And while it does have the capability of like OTKing, and theoretically it wants to go second because its power is, you know, you're capable of going second and pushing through established boards and having the ability to OTK, it doesn't do that particularly well. It can break boards and it can beat a lot of these boards, but I don't think it's fantastic at doing that. It's just kind of okay at doing that, and it's okay at setting up an end board. It's, I don't know, it's a really weird mix of problems that it has, where it's like it wants to do this thing and it wants to do this thing, but it didn't really commit either way to one or the other, and so it's kind of in this weird middle land, right? I think had they like fully committed to going second, it could have been a lot better. Had they fully committed to going first, it could have been a lot better. But it's kind of in this weird like half and half, only does one thing okay. And I think that is a bit of an issue. Okay, looking back, no, I think for the most part I am correct about. I'm happy with where most of this lands. I think I'd probably just move Radiant Typhoon down a little. But other than that, I think most of these are more or less where they should be. Exo Sister should be way further down. Honestly, Exo Sister goes in everything else. Exo Sister is significantly worse. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, I'll be honest, that's pretty much it, though. There you go. Those are my thoughts. I think there's a lot of really strong decks right now, just in general, right? Like Yummy is still incredibly powerful. Obviously I talked about Canine. Kashtira still has some really, really strong cards. So I don't know. I don't think that there is, this is not nearly as clear cut as maybe some of the previous Duelist Cups, right? Even the previous Duelist Cup that like Draco Tail was the most dominant in, I don't think this metagame is nearly as clear cut and defined as the other one. I think there's just so much stuff that you get access to that it just everything is overpowered right now. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, even as much as Blue Eyes is in everything else, Blue Eyes still has an insane turn 1 board, and it still has the ability to play going second due to a myriad of other options, right? Things like just the sheer attack stat of the Blue Eyes monsters, and the quick play fusion spell, and a whole bunch of other random stuff, giving you the ability to actually play the game going second, right? All of the hand traps that you get access to. So even as much as there are a whole bunch of decks like RB in everything else, I don't think any of these decks are particularly bad. I just think there are worse options, and I think you are kind of hindering yourself by playing anything in the lower tiers as opposed to the higher tiers. That's pretty much it. Anyway, I'm going to call it quits there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below if you guys agree, disagree. Actually, I don't care. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.